Hello, I'm Enzo, and today I'll be playing Skyfactory 4. This is a mod pack I've been meaning to play for quite a while now, both because it's been recommended since I played Skyfactory 5, and, well, I've never really beaten it. Well, I've barely gotten into it. I played it several years ago when it was released, but I never got far. Honestly, I just didn't read all of the achievements and everything like that. That's why I sucked so bad. And, well, I'm infinitely better at mod packs now. Skyfactory 4 has all sorts of unique and interesting mechanics, including a ton of crazy world generation options. As much as I would love to try any of these out, I think it's most fitting if I just stayed with the default tree in the sky. Starting out in absolute classic sky block, or in this case Skyfactory start, I spawn on a single tree and I've got to harvest as much as I possibly can so I can start building out my base. This is when we can tell that Skyfactory is extremely unique. The first tree isn't just wood, it's dirt wood. I know it sounds very bizarre, but just hang in there for a second. Every single Skyfactory has its own gimmick. I'll be perfectly honest, I've never played 1 or 2. I played 3, but I'm not 100% sure what that is. It's just like tech and ex nihilo. But 4 is where it's really interesting. Skyfactory 4 is all about trees to get your resources. Unfortunately, you can't get everything from trees. A lot of resources later on have other ways to get them, but most of the basics, a lot of vanilla and some modded stuff. The most interesting thing about starting off with a tree that gives me dirt is that I can instantly start expanding and planting another tree. It's really weird being able to do that because in normal Skyfactory, you can't. It takes a while before you can get your next dirt, but still very cool. And I immediately realized why Skyfactory 4 might be the most popular and loved one. I'm actually not sure, because mod packs are played on all sorts of different platforms, but from what I've seen, this is the most popular one. Now that it has some more room to work around, I can do the absolute classic spam shift or crouch to grow my tree a bit faster, and I can duplicate my resources just like that. Not technically duplicate because I'm harvesting them, but you get the point. I have even more stuff and I can further expand my base. I'm also calling it a base despite the fact it's just this super tiny platform at the moment. I'm trying to expand the platform so that I can get the resources that the tree actually drops because they have a tendency to fall into the void. Besides a basic axe to help me cut down trees faster, I made a crook to help me, deal with leaves a bit faster. The interesting thing is that I need resources from both the leaves and the logs to create dirt. The logs produce resin, the leaves produce acorn. These two resources can be combined in most cases to either make amber or their actual resource, for example, dirt here. The dirt amber and amber of all of the products of all of the trees really are used in different processes than the original product. For example, I can actually use dirt amber as a piece of dirt itself, I'm pretty sure, or more importantly in some bonsai trees a bit later on. But those are very far away at this point. Now that I have some more resources, it's time to get some variety. I made some drying racks to dry my dirt acorns into stone acorns. With those, I can transform a dirt sapling into a stone or petrified sapling. It's a very slow source, but it finally allows me to actually get some cobblestone and everything that implies. With this one new tree, I can make several more trees, including a bone tree, which I got by jumping on some dirt and then combining with the petrified sapling. Very similar for the clay tree, which is literally just some dirt, resin, sapling, and some stone resin. Very simple. Stone trees will be used way later on, but clay is an absolutely crucial resource here. You can probably guess why if you know what mods we're working with here. Clay is a critical part of this pack because it can be smelted into bricks, which allow me to make my beloved bonsai pots. These things are seen in several different mods, but they all do the same thing. They grow trees based on the sapling and at a speed based on the soil that you give it, especially in a pack like this where you have different dedicated multiple tiers of soil that make the tree grow faster or give more products. It's pretty awesome. For how powerful bonsai trees are, They're pretty balanced because of the brick cost early on, and, well, they don't give that many resources, way less compared to normal trees, and they give sticks and leaves, which is pretty much junk at a certain point. To get started on some other resources, I decided to make a cauldron. There's a mod that lets you make different types, including a wood one. But making lava in that just feels wrong. And, well, apparently it is, because the cauldron caught on fire and burnt up. So I had to make a stone one, and with that, I actually have access to lava now, which is awesome. I made some water earlier from that crushing tub, and with these, I can make a cobblestone generator. So I don't have to worry about getting cobblestone from the tree resin anymore, but I will need petrified resin for other saplings and stuff like that. And since you're wondering, I actually made a sand sapling earlier. You get sand acorns. All right, bear with me here, from crushing gravel acorns, which, yeah, I also forgot to mention those, but it's the exact same process. You have to crush petrified acorns. All this is done, of course, in the crushing tub. I know, it's ridiculous, and we've just started. To get access to even more types of trees, I'm going to need other vanilla saplings. Of course, this isn't going to be easy, but there are some very cool methods that this pack gives you to actually get them. First, I'll be making a birch sapling from a sand sapling dipped in water. Then a jungle sapling from a clay sapling dipped in mud. Now, if I were very smart, I would have started all of these saplings in bonsai pots so I didn't have to recreate them a bit later on. But, you know, hindsight is 20/20. Using the drying racks from earlier, I dried a jungle sapling to get some vines. With all of that, I can actually make a cottonwood sapling. This is going to be my source of string and wool for the entire run. It's not useful that much, but obviously I gotta get it from somewhere. The other sapling I made is a coal sapling, which is very simple. You just smelt up a birch sapling. Coal isn't gonna be like critical or anything like that, but it still has its uses. And naturally, it'll be required to make some other saplings later on. Another 2 new saplings. Dark oak from putting a coal sapling into water, and then lapis, combining that with another water bottle, some clay and sand resin, or that might be bone resin. I'm pretty sure it's bone. Whatever, lapis sapling. It's going to be used to make some others, and actually lapis will come in handy only really in the late game. Now that I have a bunch of different resources in basic saplings, I'm going to need to make some more advanced ones. For that, I'm going to make some special buildings I actually haven't seen before, and these are made of porcelain. Porcelain, of course, is just clay and bone meal, so that's easy enough. This is the porcelain heater and melter. It's a very interesting combination. It's kind of like a very basic smeltery. You can't even make alloys with it or anything like that. Well, you can, but you need a specialized building for that. Anyways, all I need to make is a heater and a melter. The melter is what makes it so unique. You can only put in 3 items and you can't really expand it. And this is how you'll do some basic starter metalworking, which is pretty awesome. I also find the heater at the bottom very cool because that's your first source of heat. You can actually do a lava tank instead, which I didn't realize until way later on. It's definitely the smart way to go because you actually need the heat from lava to make certain types of metal. Like some things are just too hot, require way too much heat. So I find that very interesting. Anyways, the first metal I'm going to be going for is tin. I think you need this to make iron. I honestly can't remember at this point, but whatever, it's the first thing I see in what I'll be making. To make a tin sapling, I actually need molten tin first, which sounds kind of paradoxical, right? But thankfully, there is a recipe to make the tin amber. It requires bone resin, clay resin, petrified resin, and a piece of flint. Thankfully, with my current tree setup, that's not difficult at all. Melting down the tin amber takes a while, but once it's done, I just have to add a birch sapling, and just like that, I have my first source of metal. This is extremely exciting because this is huge progress. The iron amber that I want to make next is super easy. It's just like coal, gravel, clay, and sand. The only problem is that I had to swap out my heater for a tank of lava to actually get enough temperature. It's kind of funny I made that just for one thing, and I can't even use it, but oh well, it was very neat to try. The next thing I need to get my iron sapling is actually acacia saplings, which you get by placing an apple sapling in water. Apple is actually quite simple, it's just an oak sapling with an apple. I mean, it makes complete sense. And yeah, it's the exact same process as before. I just place that in the casting table, pour some iron on it, and I have my favorite iron sapling. This is very important because iron is just like a core resource in Minecraft, especially modded Minecraft. I swear 99% of things use iron in some capacity in modded Minecraft. It's insane. Besides iron, I also very much want gold. Unfortunately, I can't make gold yet. I actually have to make lead first. To make lead, I need some lapis and iron, which is easy enough. This is when I learned that you can't use the melter to alloy stuff, which really sucks because I don't even have gold at this point. So I can't cast out ingots, which I was hoping to do. I mean, sure, I could have used clay, but it's fine. I dumped the iron into the other basin for making blocks, and I'll just pour some more iron in later. I decided to just go ahead and break the melter to get the other lead ingot out because I didn't need it. Lead isn't very useful. It will come in handy later on, but what I really want is the gold. Gold is pretty simple. It just requires some lead and iron, which I already have, and yellow dye, which is super simple. I made a little bit of grass and just put some bone meal on it to get my flowers. Besides the ability to make gold saplings, I can also use gold to make casts. This is important so I can start making more ingots and stuff like that. Of course, I could always smelt the iron, gold, amber and get single ingots out of it. However, throwing it in the melter gives you double the output, which is pretty important, especially early on when my resources are this limited. Alright, I guess it's time I got to the other big mechanic of this mod pack. Skyfactory 4 has a mechanic called Prestige. Now, you've probably heard about this in other games, mostly simulators. It's almost like a rebirth system, but not entirely. Essentially, it's a giant skill tree where you can unlock new mods and thus items for these prestige points. Now, you can get prestige points by completing the achievements, like each section gives 1 point, and way later on, you can make a machine that gives you points. It essentially pauses time and then resets the world back to where you started, or when you started the machine at least. I think this whole system is extremely stupid, and it should not be required if you want to get certain things. That's my biggest issue with it. I mean, sure, it's unique and interesting, but don't force us to use it to get some stuff. And considering I really don't feel like dealing with this dumb feature, I'm just going to be skipping it. I really just wish you didn't have to deal with it, but you do if you want any of the nice things. That's my single biggest issue with this entire mod pack. The first item you unlock is actually the hopping bonsai pot, which is quite important because this is the first way you get to actually automate your bonsai trees. Now, the first page of achievements isn't horribly difficult to complete, but at the same time, that's going to take me a while, and I want automated resources now. So I unlocked it by cheating, obviously, but like I've already said, I'm not going to deal with that whole prestige system. I think it's just a major waste of time. And you want to know the other crazy thing I haven't mentioned? Okay, well, most of the items that I really want are locked behind prestige, but the main thing is the Tinker's Construct Smeltery. Literally my favorite building is locked behind prestige. I'm not going to be taking that. No, I want my smeltery and I want it soon because of how insanely useful it's going to be. This smelter is not going to cut it. On top of that, the worst thing locked behind prestige isn't even these. It's actually the dirt. Well, mulch, actually, that increases the growth speed and amount of resources you get out of your bonsai pots. Yeah, it's a really stupid system. Now that I have access to hopping bonsai pots and automation, I built this pretty awesome setup. These are arrays of double chests, which are fed by 4 wooden hoppers. Obviously, I don't have enough iron to make every single hopper, well, metal, especially considering I need those hoppers for the pots themselves. This setup is a tiny bit slow, but it does work out in the end. Unfortunately, I have to clear out all the junk manually, leaves and sticks. But this setup is amazing because it allows me to store a ton of resources. I have crafting tables next to all of them so I can quickly retrieve, say, iron to make iron amber, and yeah, this setup works incredibly well. Now that I have a decent stockpile of resources, it's time to actually make some more saplings. The first one is going to be redstone, which I haven't made up until now, even though I could have. Again, I was just working on making all of this automation. Next up, you're gonna have to bear with me for a bit here. I'm gonna do some pretty crazy stuff. Starting out, I made this thing called the market. It gives me all sorts of options to trade different plants and resources for new things. All it costs is some wood and a piece of red wool, so that's extremely easy. I have a few main things I'd like to get out of this. First of all, leather. Now, how am I gonna get leather with limited recipes? Well, you can actually throw certain things like cooked pork chop onto a drying rack to get leather. I know it sounds extremely weird, and this is gonna make no sense, but again, bear with me here. I need the leather so that I can make a neat thing called cow seeds. It literally allows me to grow a cow. There's all sorts of seeds for different mobs in this pack, which is very nice. I got that cow into a little box here, and by dropping an anvil on it, well, we all know I'm making a cow in a jar. This is going to be an infinite source of milk and quite important. On top of that, I got some more vines and traded those for a piece of cactus. Cactus, well, it's not super useful all the time. Green dye will be nice, but there is one interesting early game use for it. It's also going to tie into the reason I have this cow in a jar for milk. It's going to get really weird. The whole reason I need all of these different bizarre things is to make slimy dirt. Yes, it's extremely weird, but combining milk and a cactus gets a slimy dirt for some reason. Whatever. This allows me to start growing slime saplings, which I can also get by combining milk and a lapis sapling. I don't show it because I had to wait for my milk to recharge. I should have just gotten 2 buckets from the cow. Whatever. I now have a source of slime trees, which is very exciting. Another super interesting type of tree I can make, with lapis, funnily enough, is mandrel saplings. Now, I've only ever used integrated dynamics once before. That was in my Ocean Block 2 run. But after using it for the first time, I understand how insanely powerful it really is. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff in integrated dynamics seems to be disabled in this pack, which really sucks because I could have used it way more than I did, or way better, I guess. But we do have other options for that, like a simple storage system, which is like a beginner's applied energistics network. Also, just wait till we get later in the video. There's something about this pack. I don't think it's infinite, but cacti can grow like extremely tall for some reason. It's pretty funny. I don't think it's infinite because it never hit the sky limit, but it was over like 24 meters or something like that. After that, I decided to make myself some nickel amber by combining bone, sand, petrified, and cocoa beans, which I get from growing jungle saplings. Very nice. Nickel doesn't have a ton of uses in here, but I will need it for a couple things, and of course, alloying with iron to make invar. And after all this time, I've finally decided I'm ready to make some diamond saplings. They're not actually that expensive, funnily enough. It requires lapis resin, gold resin, and some silver, which I made at some point. Honestly, silver isn't even that useful. And considering how many of all of these resources I have, I can just straight up craft 6 saplings instead of having to wait for them to grow and, process the leaves to hopefully get more saplings. Either way, this is very exciting. Diamonds are always nice to have, and it'll be nice to upgrade my tools for once. One thing I guess I should probably mention, not every single type of resource should be converted into amber. For example, with diamonds, it's actually best to convert the acorns straight into gems. Creating diamond amber, well, there's only one way to work with it. You actually need a nuclear craft melter. You have to melt it down into a liquid and then solidify it. So that's way later on. I definitely don't have the resources to make any of that stuff yet, which kind of sucks. It means some of my resources are wasted, but gives me some interesting ways to work with that stuff later on. And there's a similar process for other resources like lapis and redstone. Only the acorns are really good because I can make blocks of the resources out of those. However, those don't require insane working conditions like diamonds do. So you can actually throw those in the melter. Well, turn them into amber first, of course, and then melt them down, usually into blocks. While I was explaining all of that, I've been working on something very interesting. You see, I'm almost done with the first tab of achievements, or missions, whatever you want to call them. I only need a few more things to actually complete it, and that is, oddly enough, the bacon and donut saplings. They're relatively easy to make. Bacon I can pretty much buy from the market at this place, and then process it a little bit. That's easy enough. Dough, also pretty simple. And then just some sugar and an apple sapling. That's quite simple. This is my first, and okay, not my only, I think I got 2 or 3 pages complete, but one of my few legitimate points. With that, I decided to instantly go ahead and get myself fertile soil. This allows me to grow trees a bit faster and get some more loot. The recipe is very simple as well. It's just dirt and bone meal. I'll take it. And naturally, I put all this fertile soil, well, I'll spread it out across the farms eventually, but it's going to the diamond trees first. That's what need it the most. I also have those slimy saplings that I was working on a bit earlier up, and you might be wondering what they're useful for. Well, not much really. I feel like they're just used in a couple niche recipes. And of course slime balls, which are always very nice. One of the few things I'll be making with them requires this green slimy dirt that I have to smelt into a special kind of like slime crystal. I know these are used for tinker's tools, but I swear I've never built a slimy tool ever. With these new crystals, and a combination of silver and nickel resin on top of a diamond sapling, I can finally make myself some emerald saplings, which is very exciting. Even though emeralds aren't going to be insanely useful either, it'll still be nice to have them for various recipes. Now that I think about it, I really should have figured out there's probably a way to like grow villager seeds. I could have villagers. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Maybe like some villager trading of some sort? Huh, didn't think about that. Since the resources to make it are extremely simple, just sand, gravel, and clay, which I have plenty of all, which I make plenty of all of those, I decided to build myself a nice smeltery. Now, I only thought about it afterwards, but I could have made this way larger. Unfortunately, the largest size I think is like 11 by 11 inside, or it might be 9 by 9 inside, whatever. So I only made a 5 by 5 inside and 7 by 7 outside. Still, it's gonna have a huge amount of capacity, and I can build up as tall as I want until the build limit, which is pretty awesome. Tragically, the smeltery is something that's normally locked behind prestige. Like I've already said though, we know how I feel about that. And yeah, I'm having none of it because I want my smeltery. Besides getting double the product out of a lot of ambers like iron and gold, it has one other super interesting use. Even though I can't use stuff like the diamond amber just yet, I can actually use the resin that normally makes it. So it gives all the diamond and emerald resin stuff like that an actual purpose. The downside is that they take forever to start smelting and cast, but it's a fair price to pay when you have something so insanely powerful. I can just cast dozens of blocks of emeralds and diamonds. It's pretty awesome. On top of that, the single greatest part about the smeltery, in most mod packs at least, I have noticed that in GregTech they disabled the best part, but that is being able to smelt down stone or cobblestone to make seared stone, which is, the ingredient to actually make the smeltery. You can literally duplicate this just by having a simple small smeltery. It's just like the greatest building ever. Skipping the relatively easy crafting recipes, I decided to finally make a basic integrated dynamics network. Now, like I was saying earlier, I don't have access to all of the parts I really want. Like, there's no terminal, which is tragic. That would have been so handy here. So I still have to do most of the crafting manually, but this is going to be a very simple setup that's going to remove sticks and leaves, most important of all, from all of my little chest networks. This allows me to store up more stuff like acorns and resin that I actually care about. And then I'll be storing the wood, and I guess the sticks, just in massive containers with overflow, so I have some of those in reserve. And checking all the chests once it's set up, yep, it looks fine to me. It works perfectly, and now I don't have to worry about any of this stuff again, until I have to worry about it again. At that point, I'll clean this all up and make a brand new system. Even though the melter is now useless, all of the other parts are extremely useful. One of the most unique things you can actually do with these porcelain tanks is actually hold liquid. Now, that doesn't sound incredibly useful, but give me a minute here. Using redstone amber, which is normally what you'd have to melt down, the acorns make redstone blocks, you can actually pour lava onto this stuff using those tanks and get netherrack. So that's extremely useful. Netherrack obviously has all sorts of uses, including making blaze powder by jumping on it in the crushing tub, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get soul sand at all for a very long time. That's gonna be an entire process I'll get to later. Here's another super cool thing you can do with the tank. Using one of the faucets, you can actually pour liquid from a melter right into a tank. That allows me to just make a bucket of liquid or destabilized redstone. This is gonna come in handy because I need to throw this in a cauldron with one of those slimy saplings that I made earlier to get the next tier of slimy sapling. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but the purple slime does other useful things. But the purple slime will be useful for other stuff later on. After that, I decided to go ahead and make a copper sapling. The only truly unique thing about the copper, amber that I needed to make is actually a piece of red sand. Thankfully, that's not difficult at all. I just need a piece of sand and some red liquid in a cauldron, so water and red dye. That's all pretty easy. While working on the mob grinder, I discovered this. I'm not quite sure what mod does it, but there's some higher jump thing and then wall sliding, which is very interesting to say the least. But later on, they're more annoying than anything else, because getting into 1 block gaps is insanely annoying. But very neat, I just wanted to note those. And since I have the resources, I'm actually going to be building my mob farm using these conveyor blocks for the first time. They're pretty awesome because enemies can actually spawn on these things, and they all get transported to the middle instantly, making for an insanely efficient mob farm. One of the mods in here, which is easily becoming a new favorite of mine, it's like Construct Armory or something like that. And it's the reason why I'm actually using the Smeltery for its other best feature. Besides getting more resources out of certain ambers, it's awesome for alloying stuff. I made some steel early on, which is extremely nice and stupidly simple. You just throw in a ton of coal and iron and you get steel. But in my over 13 years, by the way, of Modpack experience, I have never made this stuff, despite always having Tinker's Construct. Anyways, night slime. It's a bizarre alloy of purple slime, which that's not the reason I got purple slime, but hey, it worked out in the end. Iron and seared stone. So pretty simple. The main reason I've never touched it is because I just didn't need it. I thought it was never that good, and it's probably not. The only reason I'm actually trying to make it right here is for something bizarre I'm doing. I am currently working on a set of Tinker's armor. That's the Construct's armor mod, whatever. And for that, there are a couple of parts that I want. I was reading through all of the books and then doing a bunch of testing with the materials I have available, and I figured out that night slime can actually be used for one of the armor parts instead of steel, and it'll actually give whatever, a durability bonus or something like that. But more importantly, it also gives a health boost, which is pretty cool. In this mod pack, I definitely noticed that combat and armor aren't really essential, except for maybe like the wither fight, but that was still easy. But with all the possibilities, obviously I want to make a really cool and powerful set of armor. And, funny thing, a yo-yo. That's one of the custom weapons you can do in here. It's from like its own mod. I've never seen it before, but I'm very excited to try it out because I do love me some yo-yo action. There are a ton of modifiers you can add to your armor that do all sorts of stuff. There's also like special ones, you know, pistons and feathers for like boots and legs. There's like cool gloves you can make for your chest plate that give you different effects from like attack speed to attack damage and even block reach, which sounds really cool. But the basic ones I'll be using are diamond, which actually give, I think, more durability, but also armor and toughness or something like that. They're really good. And reinforcement modifiers, which are a little bit expensive because obsidian is not easy to get right now, but absolutely worth it because that's how you get protection. The craziest thing, there's actually 8 levels of these reinforcement modifiers. I only figured that out later. And since you're probably curious how I get obsidian, it's super simple but annoying. I have to make it by placing a water bucket on top of or interacting with a lava-filled cauldron with water bucket. There we go. Unfortunately, these cauldrons don't seem to like being automated by any means. Trust me, I tried several things throughout this playthrough, they just don't like it. The yo-yo is a pretty awesome weapon. If you've ever played something like Terraria that has them, you'll kind of know how they work. You can either just hit enemies with it as a melee weapon or right click to throw it out like a ranged weapon of sorts that you kind of control. It goes where you looks, and the distance is based on whatever material you use. So I have night slime. It's just convenient that it has a good range. Unfortunately, the materials I have mean it doesn't have a very long action time. And the biggest problem with the yo-yo, you see how fast it's going through my hunger bar? It's ridiculous. But on the other hand, it does shred the mobs pretty well, so I really like it. And it's always fun to try out new weapons. But I will be making a cleaver just because it's like the best Tinker's Construct weapon. So why did I have to make a mob farm? Well, I would rather not. Unfortunately, it's kind of required for 2 specific items. One is going to be ender pearls because there's no other way to really get them. And the other is gunpowder. Interestingly enough, I need gunpowder because I need to make fire charges. I know this sounds very confusing, but I need fire charges to make a special thing called an experience pylon. And this is where you're gonna have to stick with me for a minute. I need the experience pylon because I can go ahead and throw experience into there. Besides being a nice backup in case I ever die, it's more important because I actually need experience like in bucket form. And this is the easiest way I found to do that. You can also use drops from the mob farm with the melter from another mod, might be this one, but that is not efficient at all. It's just easier to use player experience. The reason I need this experience in bucket form is so I can throw it into a tank, and this is where that whole melter setup from earlier comes in handy. I can actually use it to make soul sand. Oddly enough, throwing experience onto sand gives you soul sand. Soul sand has a couple of different uses, but it will be required in some recipes to make like the lava slime gem or whatever. And this is literally what I've been working towards for hours, and only now have I finally gotten the resources to get it. So this is very exciting. For the longest time, I thought this was kind of like a paradox because I just couldn't figure out how to get it. But once you do realize the single thing that can make the recipe work, yeah, it makes a lot more sense. Honestly, it's kind of like Greg Tech in that sense, where it's just like one single recipe or technique to get an item before like slightly early. I mean, sure, I could definitely go to the Nether at this point, especially because the Nether has some interesting properties in this pack, but I wanted to avoid that for now. I've been working on getting one of those orange magma slime trees now, and there's one other resource I actually need to make it. You see, I needed blazing pyrotheum. I think that's how you say it. I used to say it pyrolithium, but obviously there's no lithium. Whatever, pyrotheum. But to get that stuff, I actually needed sulfur. For the longest time, I thought I could only get sulfur from like the Nether or something else. Thankfully, there's a very specific grinder you can make. It's from the horsepower mod, and I can grind down netherrack into sulfur, which is insanely convenient. The netherrack saplings aren't insanely useful by themselves, it's actually the byproduct they create, aka nether quartz, that I'm looking for. Using nether quartz, I can finally make myself some quartz saplings. Besides being a better source, I also need the resin and acorns, all of their products, to make some other stuff, including one of the most important saplings, osmium. Osmium is the primary thing I've been waiting for to really get into some serious industry. I've had a tiny power sap going for a while. This is just an upgradable combustion generator. I've been burning all sorts of wood, and I've been turning that into charcoal, then charcoal blocks, and I can make upgrades relatively cheap using a lot of iron and gold, so it goes even faster and makes a tiny bit more power. But now I finally have some machines that can properly use this stuff. The metallurgic infusers are going to be my first mechanism machine. Mechanism is probably one of my favorite mods, it's just a shame you don't see it all the time. Essentially, I'll need to combine a ton of redstone and iron to get a bunch of circuits, to start making, well, other circuits, so on and so forth. I can also use osmium to make other circuits and stuff like that, eventually allowing me to upgrade all of these single buildings into higher tier factories, so I can, process more stuff at once. It's incredibly useful, especially the enriching factories, which allow me to either upgrade resources so that I can make more circuits with them, or change the state, or change the form of it, making dust in some cases. Same thing with the crushing factory, and I'll eventually build a smelter as a giant furnace. It's gonna be pretty awesome. All of the stuff I'm gonna use from Mechanism will be very handy later on. One of the main reasons I got into it though, is for a mod called Iron Jetpacks. Now I've never heard of this one before, but it's your average jetpack mod. What makes it so unique is that it uses vanilla resources for the most part to make all of the tiers, which is pretty awesome. And it starts out with stone. I just found that hilarious. A stone jetpack. There's no universe where that should work, but again, we're playing Minecraft, so it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, this is one of the mods gated behind Prestige, but we all know how I feel about that system already, so let's just skip it. We're getting right into Iron Jetpacks, and it's gonna get awesome. I'll have the ability to finally fly. Besides general flight, I wanted to get a jetpack so that I could actually travel to the Nether. Traveling to the Nether is relatively easy. All I have to do is make a cake, which I have all the resources for, and surround it in obsidian, which I have a tiny bit of. Obsidian is quite annoying to get though, because you can't really automate those crucibles despite trying literally everything. Still, they don't work at all. Anyways, the Nether is super interesting because it's not a sky Nether like I had expected, where there's nothing, but it's these, I don't even know how to describe this terrain. It's like veins, if you will, just random lengths of netherrack all over the place. I don't know how to describe this, honestly. It's a very cool looking place, I have to say. I don't need anything crazy from here, I just decided to loot around for a bit. After that, I made yet another cake to go to this dimension. I actually can't remember which one this is. All I know is that this is one of the world presets, and it is super cool. I think this would go great in any other mod pack, but most important of all about this place is that I can actually start to harvest some natural resources from this place. What do I mean by that? Well, there are certain ores that I can't actually get access to just yet, like this tritanium stuff. I have an idea for how to get it, but yeah, it's literally impossible right now. I can only mine it from this world. To get some of the ores that I currently don't have access to, I need to set up a ton of machinery. It's from Industrial Foregoing, which I have a bit of experience with. Thankfully, this is one of the older versions of it, because the newer versions are absolute garbage to work with, because I kid you not, they require you to deal with the Wither, the Warden, you have to entrap them and take resources from them. It's a nightmare in general. This is so much better than the new versions. Anyways, I built an automatic setup to create plastic, but automatic plastic is easy enough. After that, I learned kind of by accident that you can easily level up the Tinker's armor just by standing in a cactus. Yes, it sounds stupid, and it is, but it works ridiculously well. Besides plastic, Industrial Foregoing has a ton of really cool and useful buildings. You'll see one of them way later on, but for now I built a lava fabricator to help solve my lack of lava, and I built a mob grinder in my little mob farm area so I could actually get pink slime. Pink slime is a little bit annoying to get, well, like the item, not the liquid, because I have to place down the bucket and wait for a slime to spawn. Thankfully, killing these guys is affected by looting, and I have max looting on my sword, but still a little bit annoying of a process. To help solve my little obsidian problem, there's something insanely cursed I can do. That is actually harvesting it from the nether. Yes, you are seeing exactly what you think. Water in the nether. Something that does not happen in any other version of Minecraft, or Modpack for that matter, but apparently that's just a fact of life in Skyfactory 4. So yeah, that's a thing. Next up, I decided to take a quick trip to the end. And yeah, that's another odd thing about this mod pack. You don't get to fight the Ender Dragon. You can respawn her, I'm pretty sure, but the first fight just doesn't happen. Why? I legitimately have no clue. Like, this is a very odd decision from the developers, but sure. I didn't need to kill the Ender Dragon either way. I don't even care about the egg. I'm only here to explore a tiny bit and to harvest some of the ender ore that's here. You see, I'm going to need a ton of ender pearls for later on, and I'll work on a better source in a bit, but for now, the end is full of these like resonant ender ore clusters, this stuff. I can mine it to get a ton of things I can turn into ender pearls. On top of that, the end has a ton of obsidian in those giant pillars there. So overall, this place is pretty good for resources, I have to say. To further improve my entire tree growing setup, I decided to I converted it into a simple storage network. Instead of integrated dynamics, which actually is 1,000 times better, this system allows me to throw all of my chests, or crates in this case, full of resources into a giant shipping crate. It's a really neat system. Unfortunately, the network itself is extremely laggy, and the remote controls for it don't work at all. It kind of sucks. It was very neat to try. I definitely regret not just going to applied energistics immediately though. That would have been so much better. Now that I have the resources to start making more industry, which I have very much been expanding, power is becoming a major issue. My combustion generator is really good, and I have a ton of upgrades in it, but it's still just barely cutting it. I've been looking at all of my options and doing a bit of testing. I figured out a very neat thing I've never played with before: mechanism wind turbines. Alright, stay with me for a minute here. I also made some of the flux stuff. The flux points are really useful, like one of my favorite mods because wireless energy, and it's relatively cheap, but of course it's locked behind prestige. Anyways, the wind turbines are very expensive to make and require a ton of components, but they're absolutely worth it. Even though it's unlikely I will get the maximum power output from the wind turbines, I can put them at the build limit at the top of the world to get as much power as I physically can out of them. And that's definitely gonna hold me for quite a while. These things are pretty awesome, I have to say. And I'm very glad I did testing to make sure that they're better higher up, because I tried it and at the bottom of the world, I forgot what the number was, but they produce like no power at all. Obviously that makes sense because, you know, the bottom of the world is normally deep underground. In this case though, well, it's just the void, so I thought it would still do decent, but no. Anyways, I have a decent flux power network up now, which will be very handy for later on. Alright, everything I've been collecting and preparing was for this, a laser drill setup. This is another thing from Industrial Foregoing, and one of the few parts of the mod I actually enjoy. Actually, there's this building I found way later on that's stupidly overpowered. That's my new favorite thing, but this is also really good. Essentially, I need these laser drills to start mining resources out of the void. That's also why I needed all the plastic and pink slime. Yeah, it was a whole process to make these things, but it's absolutely going to be worth it because this is the only way I can get certain resources. Granted, I could have mined stuff in that like sphere world, but I wanted to try this out anyways as a way to automate that stuff. Those laser drills should have been a great example of this mod pack's biggest problem. That is, of course, I can't make every single resource I want with trees, which really sucks because I like the entire idea, but there are so many things that I just can't turn into trees. So I need to find other ways to get what I want. That's what I'm working on right now. I assure you this is going to get pretty cursed very fast. First of all, I got a blaze spawner from the nether, brought it back to my base, and got a pig spawn egg from the mob grinding utilities mod. It's relatively easy. I'm making what's called a resource hog. Essentially, you combine some dirt and water with your resource of choice, in this case, boron, and you get a resource hog. But they need stone to actually start working. I also learned that you can pick up mobs using the carry-on mod, and it is only extremely cursed, I have to say. But on the bright side, it makes transporting them extremely easy. I've never worked with the Resource Hog mod before, but it is very awesome, I have to say. Essentially, these hogs, when provided with a stone floor, will dig for truffles. These truffles can be combined to make your resource of choice. And, as all of you should know from any automation game, they pay themselves off extremely fast. And this inspired me to make a great, or terrible idea, based on how you see it. Now, this design isn't the best. I figured out that a checkerboard pattern uses the space more efficiently, but it's a proof of concept. Essentially, we just throw all of these resource hogs into a 1-block space where, yeah, they're gonna live there for the rest of time, by the way. And since they can't move, all they will do is try to find truffles. When a truffle is dug up, it'll automatically be broken by the auto miner and picked up by the vacuum hopper. Yeah, this is pretty awesome. So this is one of the new ways to get resources, or at least things I can't get from trees. And that's going to be a lot of the other modded resources I want, like nuclear craft stuff. I was also working on a bunch of side projects, including making an applied energistic system, which there's a lot of weird stuff about that I'll get to in a bit, but I found this one awesome mod that allows you to make airships. Unfortunately, they're not like giant custom multi-blocks, but you can drop bombs. And I mean, how am I supposed to say no to that? I don't know what the legitimate use for this is, especially in a Skyfactory. You know, sky with nothing to bomb. Maybe the nether or end, but like, yeah, pretty useless. Still very cool. Back to applied energistics, there are some things I want to talk about. First of all, channels are disabled in this pack, which makes it easier on one hand, but really sucks because I'm playing Greg Tech right now, and I would have loved the experience of working with networks a bit more. The other problem is that the wireless terminal is only to view your, well, network. There's no crafting terminal, which is extremely stupid. The one thing I would have liked to have, but okay, whatever. The biggest issue with this pack, and I don't know why this is, I have a feeling it's a config the developer disabled for the dumbest reason ever. Annihilation planes don't interact with truffles, or at least they don't pick them up like they should. Annihilation planes destroy whatever's in front of them, great for stuff like cobblestone generators, and exactly the same thing here. The problem is, yeah, they just don't work with truffles for some reason. Every other mod pack, they do work with truffles. I've been looking at this for a while, but they don't in here. Even the identity annihilation planes, which are like Silk Touch versions, those don't work. So it really sucks, and this is where like the beginning of the end of this mod pack started for me, because like you just ruined one of my best ideas, and I really don't feel like playing anymore. But whatever, that means I'll have to use auto miners, which really sucks because they are extremely laggy compared to applied energistics, which is very well known for being efficient. After a ridiculous amount of work, I've managed to set up the farm. Yeah, it's about as horrible as it looks, I have to admit. I've got a few different types of resource hogs. I've got boron, lithium, uranium, and probably one other. I actually can't remember at this point, but they'll be generating me a fair amount of resources. It's pretty awesome. Oh no, I remember this clip. All right, so the Apotheosis mod, I think that's what lets you add modifiers to your spawners to make them do different things. I have like redstone control and the dragon egg to make it spawn without players nearby. You can also lower the time it takes for the pigs to spawn. In case you didn't know, there's no cap on this, by the way. So when I put the delay to 0, I should have figured what was about to happen, and I didn't think about it. Just you watch. It is the stupidest thing I've ever done. Alright, in case you don't know why this is happening, Minecraft's tick rate is 20 per second. What I'm trying to say is that 20 times a second, because there's no delay on this spawner, a pig is spawning. Yes, you heard that right. 20 pigs per second. Oh, it just gets so stupid the longer I watch this clip. I love it so much. And yeah, considering I can't access the spawner anymore because, you know, it's covered in pigs, they're kind of spawning infinitely, and since there are so many, they've started to flood off of the side. It is literally a pig flood. It is the greatest thing I've ever created. Despite how funny it is, though, the slight problem is that, well, I've got to clean this whole mess up, which took a very long time, let me tell you. Still, I think that's one of the best things I've ever done in Minecraft, and gives me some terrible options for what I can do with this thing. There is a way to do the, reverse modifiers on these spawners, but instead I'll just use, a button to control the spawning time. Still, that's pretty awesome, I have to say. Naturally, once you've found the funniest thing you've ever seen, it's only gonna go downhill from there. And unfortunately, I'm guessing this is more developer configuration. You see, the spawner isn't playing nice with what I wanted. Even though it can do some hilarious things like spawn a near infinite amount of mobs instantly, it's not doing the other things I wanted. You see, my entire plan is, since the whole annihilation plane idea didn't work, I wanted to get Resource Hogs into a spawner. Resource Hogs actually have another drop besides their truffles. When you kill them, they drop bacon, which is far more efficient to process than truffles. So I was thinking, what if I just built a massive farm and used a powerful looting source to get tons of bacon and process that into my resources? Well, I was really hoping to do that, and I guarantee you, I spent hours trying to figure out all the stuff that I could. Unfortunately, mob grinding utilities doesn't work very well with the different types of resource hogs, and I kid you not, I looked up some crazy commands that allow me to make custom spawners in the world, and in theory, those should have spawned, the specific types of resource hogs. Unfortunately, no. Even my crazy command work didn't do anything. It's quite tragic that none of the mods wanted to work at all, because I wanted this just so badly to work. This could have been so awesome. Unfortunately, no, it's just Skyfactory 4, which is gonna lead me down another path of resource generation I really didn't want to do because it's in so many other mods. I would have loved to have Resource Hogs work, but, well, you see, I've tried everything up until this point, so I have no other options. But the resource squeeze isn't going to be a massive problem till near the end of the game, so it's best not to worry about it for now. Naturally, you've seen all of the resources I've been collecting, and you can probably guess what I'm working on, or maybe you see what I'm working on here. Nuclear craft. I've only played with this mod once before, that was obviously back in my compact claustrophobia run, so I don't remember a ton about it, but at the same time, I know enough to get myself started. I'm just gonna make a relatively basic fission reactor for some decent power generation. And in case you're wondering how I got my cryothium dust, yes, first of all, I'm saying it properly this time. I always said it as cryolithium, but I see how that's wrong. Anyways, it's possible to get some blizz spawns in that other dimension, and using the mob data simulator thingy, I can farm a bunch of them and infinitely create blizz rods, which is very nice. Unfortunately, there's no way to pulverize them and get more out of the rod, so it requires a ton of waiting to get enough cryothium, but it's absolutely worth it as it is one of the best cooling sources. Alright, but besides all of the other issues I've had, the parabox prestige system, the resource gathering, and applied energistics, well, guess what? I figured out the single biggest problem with the entire pack. The lack of any sort of building wand or mechanic like that. Now, there is something, it has to do with some sort of end mod that I've never seen before, for obvious reason. I tried to get into it a bit later on, but I just couldn't because it was way too confusing. There's no in-game documentation, and the biggest problem is it requires all sorts of end technology, which I didn't want to get into. But yeah, there is no sort of builder's wand to make things way easier, which is insanely annoying, to say the least. On top of that, I built my smeltery a bit too big, so I had to use some commands to enchant my pickaxe, and yeah, this is just a nightmare, I have to say. The building gadgets you get access to, they're good for building some things, but certain blocks like seared stone and some nuclear craft stuff you'll see later on are not considered standard blocks. I don't know actually how the system works. I know there's something to do with like tile entities, and these stone blocks are considered tile entities because you can pick them up with the carry-on mod. So there's something weird about that. I don't know. I think this is just very poorly thought out. Oh yeah, the whole reason I was making that massive smeltery is for this. You see, I can use the melter to melt down amber and stuff like that, or since I have just an unreal amount of acorns and everything else, I can just straight up throw them into a giant smeltery like this, melt them all down, extract them, and use the ingot formers to turn them back into ingots, or, well, gems in Diamond's case. It's pretty awesome, I have to say. And this setup is going to be helpful for one of my endgame plans. Another mod that's obviously gated behind Prestige is Project E. What's crazy is that this is the most expensive one, at like 50 points to unlock the base mod and 250, which is insane. I don't know why you would get that legitimately to unlock the special like game mode with it. Yeah, I think that's just a major waste of time. On the other side, Project E itself is a massive time saver because it allows me to basically just generate resources easily. I can throw resources in there to learn them and thus duplicate them when I get enough matter. Thankfully, this is really good and it works with nuclear craft stuff. That's going to make building reactors way easier. On top of that, I have an insane amount of valuable resources like diamonds, gold, and emeralds from my tree farm, so I have plenty of matter to work with. And I was gonna explain how I did all of the mechanism, substrate, and honestly, I can't even remember what the plastic is anymore. It's been so long since I played this pack. But one of the few things I haven't worked with before is, well, industrial foregoing stuff like this animal sewer. I need to make fertilizer. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. I require sewage, which comes from animals. Thankfully, I happen to have a massive collection of chickens. I also have a muffler on them so that you can't hear the annoying things, but this is how I'm gonna get my fertilizer. Obviously, I need fertilizer and all the other mechanism resources to make better dirt and mulch for my trees. Oh, I see now. The plastic is HDPE, high density polyurethane or something like that. That makes a bit more sense. If you've seen Mechanism before, you'll probably know what all this stuff is and how the line works. It's not complicated at all. And probably my favorite building from Industrial Foregoing is the Stonework Factory. It allows you to process stone in all sorts of ways, on top of being like an insanely fast cobblestone generator, and it actually allows me to make silicone insanely easily, as well as glass, but silicone is a bit more important right now because I need to automate applied energistics circuits for one of my projects. The reason I need so many circuits is because I've had my eye on a specific thing. It is the highest tier of gas storage possible. 4096K. Now, I don't remember how much like gas in this case a byte holds, but that's like 4 million bytes, or something like that, 40 million. It's a lot of storage essentially. Actually, the insane part is that it's almost gonna get used up near the end of the episode. It's pretty crazy. Essentially, I've been working on fusion as my next major project. For now, I can only really make a small basic fusion reactor because they are insanely expensive to build, especially starting them up. But thankfully, the fuel for them is stupidly cheap. It's just water. Well, technically you have to electrolyze it using mechanism, but those machines are so insanely fast, it's really easy. So yeah, hydrogen, technically. The nice thing is that this creates, I think it's deuterium from this step, and then you can combine deuterium with hydrogen in another fusion reactor to make tritium. Tritium and hydrogen gives you something else. I honestly can't remember at this point. It might be helium-3, but essentially you can get just insane amounts of power from this whole process. The only trade-off is that fusion requires even more insane amounts of power to actually start up. That's the primary issue. Thus, I've had to build a ton of smaller fission nuclear reactors to get the power to start it up. And listen to that beautiful hum. That's why I love nuclear craft. It is probably one of my favorite mods. Unfortunately, I've only played with it twice now. First, obviously, compact claustrophobia, and this is my second time getting to know it. But yeah, it's awesome to have it finally running. Unfortunately, it's going to take a very long time to start up and get up to temperature. We're talking like billions of degrees here because, you know, fusion energy, power of the sun and all. So it's going to take a while to get up to the proper temperature. The most interesting thing is that at a certain point, it'll get too hot for the system and it'll actually start losing efficiency. So I'll have to, and I didn't do this soon enough, so I had to add extra cooling, but at some point you will have to start adding active cooling, which water is completely free because of the water generators, which I can also throw into Project E to duplicate them easily, which is very nice. Overall, it's just a great process. Oh yeah, do you guys remember that whole resource issue from earlier on? Well, I have been using Project E to get a lot of stuff, but that's not exactly an automatic long-term solution. Unfortunately, there's only one route to go from here: mystical agriculture. As you should have all figured by now, this is another prestige mod. Honestly, I'd rather not have to use it because mystical agriculture is in so many other packs, but you know, it's like the final option I have at this point. So I can get some Supremium Essence, or, you know, the red one. I can never remember the difference between the two. Whatever. Because I have a bunch of Wither mob data lying around, so that's easy enough. I can turn those into crops. And this whole setup, I've never seen this ring from Project E before, but you put it on a pedestal, it costs a ton of matter to make this thing, and it automatically harvests and grows crops extremely fast. Of course, I need a planter to replant the crops, and then I filter out the seeds and the essence. Pretty simple system. I'm doing this to work my way up to tier 6 essence, so I can farm essence insanely fast, and eventually I'll get to making stuff like uranium seeds, which are my primary goal for this. I also decided to get a bit into this mod called Matter Overdrive. I've seen it a few times before, but I've never gotten into it. Essentially, it allows you to turn yourself into an android and have all sorts of really cool weapons and stuff like that, on top of all the neat buildings it adds, as well as like a matter system very similar to Project E. So that's cool. The main thing I say that sucks about this mod is the like crafting station for all of your circuits only does recipes one at a time, which is insanely annoying to deal with, but thankfully I didn't need that many. Oh yeah, but the main reason you do this mod is to become an android, which is pretty awesome, I have to say. And of course, you've got your whole Matrix reference, red pill, blue pill. I find that pretty awesome. And did I mention that it actually kills you when you take these things? So not exactly great for hardcore. Anyways, the main advantages of being an android is that, well, you have to spend a ton of XP to get all the skills, but thankfully I have all the mob data chunks, and those are like solid XP, but I can get huge stats from skills and actual like limbs that I've picked up from previous androids that I've killed. Most of the normal limbs don't give much, but if you get like legendary pieces, they have insanely good stats, like tons of health and speed, attack damage, great stuff like that. The only thing I messed up the first time I was working with this, I reset my skill tree, but I kind of went for the whole defensive tree. Apparently you can only have one or the other. You can't have offense and defense at the same time, which kind of sucks, but makes sense. Still, all of this is pretty awesome. Not really useful at all because I'm not like fighting enemies at all. I have no reason for combat, but still very neat, certainly. Oh, and the best part? With certain skills, I think you can ignore having to breathe underwater, so no more oxygen problems, and the best of all, you can use energy instead of food, so that you don't have to worry about that ever again. So very cool mod overall. I just don't see much of a use here. I also made this awesome power cell multi-block. It's from RF Tools. Well, RF Tools Power. I know that mod, it's like the dimensional one. Anyways, this is just like a block you can add together and keep expanding it for a just unbelievable amount of power storage, which is pretty awesome. I need that, especially considering I want to get more into fusion power. And the best part is that they're relatively cheap. I can actually duplicate most of the materials for it. I forgot what the bottleneck is. For some reason, Project E, in this pack at least, doesn't work with ender pearls or blaze powder, one of those two. So that's a bit annoying, but otherwise relatively cheap and easy to make. And with an unfathomably large amount of energy storage, I'm going to need a reactor to match. Or at least a fission reactor to start. And yeah, that's the entire setup right there. This has a 24 cube in the middle. You get what I'm saying, 24, 24, 24. You see it there. And the design is using lapis and tin coolers to get as much cooling as physically possible so that I can throw any sort of fuel in here, no matter the heat, and generate ridiculous amounts of power. It's pretty awesome, I have to say. And this is going to be powering my next and final major project of the run. The whole reason I need all of that power infrastructure is for this abomination. Yeah, this is a maximum size fusion reactor. Now, it's only maximum size. Apparently that's because of the amount of connectors you have in the middle. I think the total diameter is like 49 blocks or somewhere around there. It's insane, that's all I know. And this thing is just gonna steal power from the rest of my base because remember, each one of those little fusion magnets requires 200 RF a tick. Honestly, I'm not gonna do the math because I don't remember it, but it's just an unbelievable amount. I was originally planning to use the deuterium byproduct that I got for my first one. However, I think it would chew through it so fast, it's probably not a good idea. I could probably make it work. I just decided to go with hydrogen because it's easy. As you can probably tell, either by how everything's been going or the duration of the video, we are nearing the end. There's just one last thing I want to get done to truly wrap up this run. First of all, I need to make black iron ingots, which are exactly what they sound like. Black dye, either ink sacs or coal. I'm gonna be using ink sacs because I actually made a little platform at the bottom of my world. Squids like to spawn in that water that's flowing from my farm, thus infinite squid farm. It's pretty awesome. So that's how I'll get this stuff. It's used in this mod, which is just like your standard, end game singularity type thing. It's like, I legitimately can't remember the name of the other one. Avaridia, something like that. It's kind of like that, except it doesn't have all the infinity, crazy ingots at the end. You just want to get the ultimate singularity to truly beat the game. Unfortunately, for some reason, my thing just didn't work. Like, the crafter didn't want to compress everything. It has power. I've started giving it resources. It just refused to do anything. I mean, I didn't really have to even do this because I've already beaten the game several times over with everything I have available to me, but that's still disappointing. It just refused to work. Overall, Skyfactory 4 was very fun for the most part. Of course, having to build literally everything myself really sucked. The resource hogs, and I guess, trees not giving everything also kind of sucks. But overall, I think it was very fun. I was hoping to make 3 fusion reactors at the end. I think I was saying that earlier. So I could get the maximum 33+ million power But yeah, it's not going to be possible at this rate. I don't have the time to build 2 more of these things and set everything else. But as always, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I really appreciate it. A special thank you, as always, to my channel members and supporters. This is going to be Enzo from Lookintogaming, signing out.